Welcome to the All About You podcast. My name is Sheila and I am your host. In this podcast, I invite everyday people to tell their stories of their travels, passions, and what makes them happy. So if you have a story to tell, please contact me on allaboutyoupodcast@yahoo.com and let's tell your story. So now for today's conversation. Welcome to another conversation on the All About You podcast. And today my guest is Trish, and we're going to be talking about Trish's journey from the UK to Valencia to live. So Trish, welcome to All About You podcast.
It's nice to be here, thank you.
So Trish, where were you living originally in the UK before you came to Spain?
I lived in a place called Root. Most people have never heard of it. It's in North Lincolnshire. More specifically the Isle of Axholme, which most people again have never heard of. And the Isle of Axholme is the sort of confluence of South Yorkshire, North Lincolnshire, Nottinghamshire, and a few other places. You can tell actually when you see the road through it, because it's one bit of the road's done by South Yorkshire, then the other bit's not done by North Lincolnshire, and then another bit's done by Nottinghamshire.
Oh, right.
It gets very confusing. But it's about 2.5 miles from Doncaster Airport.
Okay, and were you born in that area?
I was born in Doncaster.
So, what were you doing that brought you to Valencia?
I wasn't doing anything. My husband was in the ceramics industry, and he used to visit Valencia when he came to Castellón to go and see Zaconio, the company that he was an agent for. And I would accompany him, and I fell in love with Valencia. So we bought an apartment in Valencia so that he could spend time when he was in business in Valencia as well as in Castellón, because Castellón's not terribly exciting.
So did you have any experience of other cities in Spain before you picked Valencia?
We did have a house down in Andalusia, which was beautiful, but very boring. No, I didn't know many other cities in Spain, but I did know one or two other areas. And I knew I didn't want to live in an area that was basically just tourism.
So are you a city girl or a rural girl?
Well, that's a difficult one, because when I think about it, I've actually spent most of my life living in the country. And whilst I find Valencia very exciting, I really, really, really miss gardening. I love, 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 love my garden. And I do miss being able to literally walk out the door and sit on the grass and dig the garden and, things like that.
I mean, I can understand that because there's a very big contrast. We've got Valencia city, where a majority of people are living in apartments that have a small balcony. You might be able to have a few pots with flowers in, but that's about it. Or you're living right out in the countryside where you've got
acres of campo,
land.
Yeah,
absolutely.
The real problem is here for me is the lack of outside space. If I had a little garden, I'd be quite happy. I suppose if I had a big terrace that I could fill with plants and put things on, I'd probably be quite happy. But I have 3 balconies, which are beautiful. It's not a garden.
They don't cut it with the gardening.
No, I like to be able to dig.
So have you got green fingers then?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I've done an awful lot of gardening in my life. Yeah.
So are you fruit and vegetables, or are you flowers?
I've done both of those in the house in Root. I had 3.5 acres of garden, and I had a greenhouse and an orchard and a vegetable garden, as well as lots and lots of other garden, and I did an awful lot of it myself.
So you must have been pretty self-sufficient with fruit and vegetables then?
Well, overwhelmed, I think, is the word you're looking for. When there's only 1 or 2 of you, you don't really need, 7 rows of potatoes and 3 big tomato plants that are churning out tomatoes by the pound every day. But it was fine when I had my restaurant, because of course I used it an awful lot for my restaurant.
You had a restaurant?
Yeah, before I came here.
Oh, so what type of restaurant did you have?
It was mostly sort of a Mediterranean type food. I certainly did tapas, but I did a lot of English food as well, obviously.
I mean, anybody who runs a bar or a restaurant, how do you cope with the hours and the lifestyle when you're running something like that?
Well, you're tired all the time. I actually had a deli, a catering company and a restaurant all at the same time. And yeah, I think I probably was starting to lose my mind. I was working ridiculous hours. But the one thing I did discover was that, and I wasn't that young either, but I could outwork the youngsters. And it's amazing what you can do if you want to do it. You know, you can really sort of put your mind to it. You can do it. Unfortunately, it was during that time that my husband got cancer again and eventually died, which put paid to my restaurant, because by the time that he died in 2012, I was exhausted, beyond exhaustion. I mean, I'd sort of been running the restaurant, keeping that going and keeping him going, you know, going into hospital and coming out of hospital. So in the end, I closed it. I didn't really want to, but I was going to have a nervous breakdown if I hadn't done, I think.
My God, so you had so much on your plate at that point.
Exactly. It was quite hard at that point, yeah.
Was it always a dream to own a restaurant?
No.
Because I always think people who run bars and restaurants, maybe their family has had a bar or restaurant, or you come from, you know, a foodie type family. So where did the idea of running a restaurant come from then?
I don't really know. I've always cooked. And in actual fact, when I really think about it, I'm not all that keen on cooking, but I do like feeding people.
Right, there's obviously a big difference, isn't there?
There is. I do like to feed people. I like the social side of eating and sharing. I don't mind cooking, obviously, otherwise I wouldn't do it at all. But the pleasure really is more from feeding people than eating. I'm not interested particularly in eating the food myself, in a sense. Although it does make me super critical whenever I go to any other restaurants, you know.
I was going to ask you about that. I was going to ask, obviously, if you've run your own restaurant, you know, you have your own menus, your own standards. Are you ever off the clock when you go to another restaurant?
No, because what really happens is you know how difficult it is to produce that meal. And you know that if you want to be a restaurateur and to have a restaurant, there's a certain standard that you have to sort of rise to or be able to achieve. And some of the food is so appalling that, frankly, you know, it isn't acceptable as home cooking, let alone restaurant cooking where somebody wants you to pay for it. I mean, take for example, we went for Sunday lunch this last Sunday to a place that was advertising they were doing English Sunday lunches, and my friend's so missing his roast beef dinner. He says, oh, let's go. So 4 of us went. It was the most disgusting meal I've ever had. The broccoli and the carrots were both frozen and they were like slop. The broccoli particularly was like mush.
Just overcooked.
Oh, it was just so overcooked. And I said, well, I'll have beef. And somebody else said, I'll have lamb. Well, when it turned up, you'd got like a leg of chicken, a slice of what looked like boiled lamb, and she'd done a bit of steak chopped up in a bowl for us to share. And it bore no resemblance. She said, well, I lived in England for 22 years, so she knew all about Sunday lunches. And it bore no resemblance to the thing that she was advertising, and tasted appalling. The roast potatoes, by the way, I think had been roast potatoes, which then got put in the chip fryer. And they were disgusting.
For me, roast dinner is just the nirvana. I absolutely love it. And I enjoy cooking roast dinner. I mean, it's quite easy. I mean, all the effort is in the preparation.
Absolutely.
It basically cooks itself.
Absolutely.
And rather like you, I love cooking for other people. I love to see them, you know, enjoying it, and any more potatoes, any more vegetables, that type of thing. As you say, it's the sharing of food.
Absolutely.
Do you sometimes find, though, if you spend a long time cooking a meal for people, when it comes to sitting down and eating, you are like, I'm not interested, I've been doing this all day, I'm just not hungry now. Do you find that?
Just about all the time. I find it puzzling, really, because it isn't just the fact that, you know, you've smelt it and this, that and the other. Whenever I did outside catering, where I would go to somebody's house and cook the food at their house and have it served at their house, I loved that. because I didn't have to eat it. I didn't have to be involved in that side of it. I literally just presented it, they ate it, and I stood back. I actually enjoyed that so much more. I don't think I'm that interested in food in itself.
I think it's rather like this thing, you know, if you worked in a chocolate shop, would you stop eating chocolate? And I think when you've been cooking with food all day, or, you know, you're doing a dinner party or something like that, when it comes to eating, I'm like, you know, I've been looking at this all day and I'm over it now. Whether that's because you've been smelling the food
Possibly.
And then you come to sit down and it's like, oh, you know, just give me a glass of wine.
I think you might be right, because the few times I really do enjoy something is when somebody else has cooked it and they've cooked it well. You know, and I'm hungry. And I think perhaps when you're preparing food all the time, you're not hungry, because I suppose whether you realise it or not, maybe you nibble a little bit along the way, I'm not sure. But definitely, I don't cook for myself, for example. I will cook a meal. If you were coming for a meal, I would cook a meal. But I wouldn't bother going to the whole trouble of cooking a full, proper meal for myself. Now, my sister does, and she's a vegan. So she makes all sorts of spectacular food that's vegan. And actually, some of it's nice. But she will actually make pasta from scratch for herself. You know, which I think's excessive beyond belief. But for myself, you know, this is why I say, so I'm missing bread, because a sandwich is my go-to, you know, another sandwich.
It's so interesting, isn't it? You've run a restaurant, but you're not that interested.
Well, my friend Kerry, she's a chef and housekeeper for aristocracy. And she used to come and stay with me, and we'd sort of get cabbaged out on the settee with a bottle of wine, a pack of Doritos and some salsa dip, and watch telly.
And you two were happy as Larry.
Yeah, and we both said, you know, we only cook for money.
I love that expression, we cook for money. So no aspirations for opening a restaurant in Valencia then?
No. I must admit, at times I think it would be so much easier now, because I know I've learned so much from the experience. And like on Sunday, you know, I wanted to jump up, go in a kitchen and go and rattle somebody and say, you know, this is not how you do it. But apart from that, no, I don't intend to. It's such hard work. It is such incredible hard work. I'm not even sure I could do it now.
As you say, it's hard work, it's long hours, it's unsociable.
But I miss the adrenaline rush. Because, I mean, at times when we were really busy and I got big events on, you'd be so hyped up. There was a lot of satisfaction when you'd finished. A lot of satisfaction. There's a lot of satisfaction when you stand back and you've made a beautiful room and all the food looks beautiful and everybody's happy. Yeah.
I mean, I must admit...
It's creative.
Yeah, absolutely. And I totally get that, because, for example, if I have a dinner party or have people round, to me, the tablecloth has to be ironed. How am I going to fold the napkins? Which glasses? Am I going to have candles, flower? I love all that sort of thing.
See, I find that hard at this moment in time, because there's only me. So, I mean, I don't know how much Pete does for you, but at least in the past, Joe would do an awful lot of that side of it while I was doing the cooking. So at the moment, because I'm on my own, I'm doing the cooking and I'm getting the table ready and I'm trying to iron the tablecloth and I'm trying to find the napkins and so on and so on. And I am finding that that's a pain, you know, that I can't just say to somebody, set the table.
Yeah, I get that. I mean, a shout out to my husband Pete, he's brilliant. He knows what his jobs are.
He knows the drill.
He knows the drill, absolutely.
Yes.
And I think that's good, because I think one of the greatest pleasures in life is sitting down, having a meal with people, a glass of wine and the after dinner conversation or the after lunch conversation.
Absolutely. I mean, sometimes I look around the table and, you know, when they're all murmuring and buzzing like little bees, all chitty-chatting and everybody's comfortable and everybody's happy and they've all had all the food that they need to have. It is a nice feeling, yes.
And I think it's that one of the sort of the main things, isn't it, is sharing food and drink with other people. It's that connection.
I think that it's quite a strong drive, because apart from, obviously, sex, and you can't have sex with everybody, can you? Well, you can try, but perhaps not. But you take my point, it is an actual drive, because I think it is some of the things that do bring people together, this sharing of food. And maybe people like me and you, who have this desire to feed people, are maybe some of the stronger drivers of that idea of bringing people together via food.
Yeah, I think that's very true what you say. When you came to Valencia then, and you were living in the city, what was your first thoughts about Valencia?
What?
Did you
All that time ago?
Yeah, did you settle quite happily here?
Well, don't forget, I didn't live here originally, so for 25 years I've been visiting. Now, are we talking about then, or are you talking about when I finally moved here?
When you finally moved here, did you feel you sort of fitted in straight away? Or?
No, on the contrary. I think by the time I finally got here, I was so stressed that I was actually very concerned that I might be making a mistake. And that is one of the reasons why I didn't dive in, unfortunately, and apply for my residencia. Because I thought, I don't even know if I really want to stay here. Because it was okay in theory, but in reality, Also, my apartment hadn't been renovated at that point. So it was three bedrooms and a sitting room with black floors and dark and dingy, and I hated it. And so small compared to my house, and no garden and all these things. And I was on my own, and I got myself quite upset about the whole thing, and had to sort of give myself a good talking to and pop home and have a word and come back again, you know what I mean?
I can totally understand that, because a lot of the apartments here are very old, and as you say, they're very dark. You know, they've got dark marble floors, lots of dark wood furniture and the doors, that type of thing. So a lot of the older apartments are incredibly dark. And you've gone from having a house with space and a garden into one of these old apartments, quite dark, small balconies.
Small rooms.
And I think one of the main things is you had, you know, a full life previously. You get here and it's like, well, what am I going to do? And I think this is a mistake a lot of people make, is you're in the UK, you can speak the language, you've got a job or an established life, and you come here and it's like, oh my God, who am I? What am I going to do?
Well, exactly. I mean, I was still working because I had another career after my restaurant. After my husband died, I ended up working with my cousin's husband, who was a chemist, and we went into the vape industry. So we were making vape e-liquids.
As in vaping?
Yeah, cigarettes.
Oh, right,
yeah.
Okay.
And Damien was running a factory, so I worked with him. And then eventually, in 2016, the Tobacco Products Directive came out, which meant that anybody who produced vape e-liquids, they had to be regulated. Now, Damien, being a chemist, had already been in regulation. Previous companies he worked for a drug company. So he knew what this entailed more than most people. So we spent, when I said, the thing came out in 2016, so we must have spent the whole previous year researching all the chemicals that went into vape flavourings and e-liquids, and produced a database of these chemicals, which eventually became a computer program. So when the directive came out, what you had to do is you had to, for every single e-liquid that you produced, for every flavour and every size of nicotine, so 3 milligrams of nicotine, 6 milligrams, 9 milligrams, 12 milligrams, blah, blah, up to 20 milligrams, you had to have a certificate and a number for each one of these. And to achieve that, you had to have it tested. So we had to test every one of these liquids, send them off to a lab to be tested, to be sure of what was in and what wasn't in there. Then we had to take the contents and compare them with all the different data that we'd found. And it's a whole thing that we had to do, and we ended up making it into a program. I say we did, we had a computer expert as well. So we turned that into a program, and then effectively we regulated probably 66% of all the UK e-liquids through our company. And it was incredible hard work, because the MHRA had accounted for, probably they thought about 17,000 submissions. And the first time they opened the portal, we got 47,000 submissions, which crashed the portal. And because they crashed it, they said, oh, well, we're going to extend the date from, I think it was September 2016 to the 1st of January 2017. So what happened? All our customers produced much more stuff and wanted it to go through. So constantly they kept moving the date because it kept crashing the portal, and constantly people were producing more liquids because of them making a lot of money on these liquids at the time, and they needed the certification for it. So it was crazy.
Now, I have a question about this vaping. I remember when you just walked down the road and there was shop after shop after shop about these vapors. Was the vaping supposed to be a system for people to quit smoking, or was it supposed to be a replacement where people would go cold turkey but vape? And how successful was it? I mean, would we say out of 100 people who went down the vaping route, they were successful in giving up smoking? Because you just don't see those shops now, certainly not in Valencia.
Well, Valencia, for example, took no notice of the Tobacco Products Directive at all and didn't enact it until 2018, mostly because they actually prefer smoking here. The number of people who actually vaped in Spain is very, very small. In fact, the time you would see the shops is anywhere where there's lots of English people, not Spanish people. So you'll see them on the Costa del Sol, for instance. But you're right, I've looked for a shop in Valencia and I can't find one. It was invented originally by somebody who wanted his mother to stop smoking. That was the idea of it. My sister, for example, vapes and has vaped for years, and she smoked quite heavily before that. So effectively it's helped her not smoke, and it is so much better for you than smoking. A lot of people who have vaped have gone back to smoking. A lot of people who vape have stopped smoking. A lot of people who vape don't have nicotine in the vape at all. For a lot of those people, it's more like a sort of dummy. So you can have it with zero nicotine. And this is one of the things that has actually killed the vape industry anyway, because when it first came out and it was regulated, you couldn't sell vape e-liquids unless you'd got an ECID number. The only way to get an ECID number is to go through the process. And once you've gone through the process and you've got your number, you're published by the MHRA. So if I want to buy your liquid, I would look it up and, yep, you're there. Yep, the number's there. And then you know that it's safe. Anything else that's not got one is illegal and isn't safe. So the smarties, what they did, so lots of companies paid a lot of money to do this. Thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds to be legal, to be regulated. And then the wide boys thought, I know what we'll do. We'll sell liquid with no nicotine in it. And because it's not got nicotine, it doesn't come under the protection of the Tobacco Products Directive. Then what they would do is they would sell you a bottle of 20 milligrams of nicotine, which they have got an ECID number for. And then you mix it up however you want.
God. I mean, there's always someone who's going to play outside the sandbox.
Absolutely. And what was really annoying was the MHRA, who should have done something about it. Other countries did. Other countries included zero. They said, it's all got to be included. But England didn't. So they let all these people pay all that money. And bear in mind that every time that you did a submission, they got £150 for these thousands upon thousands upon thousands of submissions.
Yeah.
They were getting £150 out of it. So they should have protected the companies that were playing the game and playing fairly. And we petitioned them to do so, but they never did. They just let them sort of go to the wolves. So effectively, they were undermining all the other companies. People were buying the stuff. They could be making it in their lavatory for all you know, because you've no idea what flavourings were in there. And I'm just surprised that people haven't actually been ill. And I mean, it still exists, but it's destroyed in its real sense. And it was, interestingly, one of the most effective ways of cutting down on smoking and stopping smoking that was actually taken up by people themselves and also financed by people themselves. So, it was actually doing quite well until it became undermined. And we were back to where you don't really know what the hell you're smoking.
I think the interesting thing is, you said a bit earlier, using it's a bit like a dummy, because for a lot of people smoking, it's habit.
Oh, yeah.
You know, after lunch, after dinner, with a cup of coffee, with a glass of wine, it's glass of wine in one hand, a cigarette in the other. Or after a meal. And the fact that the cigarette had been replaced by the vape, it was, I've got something in my hand. It is a bit like an adult dummy.
It is, yeah.
I mean, the thing is, you just do not see people using them now. I remember, when we did have in Valencia, so many people, literally would sit on the bus, they'd sit on the metro, walking around. Everybody was sucking on these vape things. You just don't see that.
Well, I also think that, I don't know whether in the UK it's died out in that sense. I think it never was such a big thing here. It definitely was a much stronger thing in the UK. But the fact that people will actually use zero nicotine does suggest that it is more a comforter than it is an addiction. I mean, I know that nicotine isn't a very addictive drug. It most certainly is. But it's one of the fastest going into your bloodstream, but it's also one of the fastest coming out.
Yeah.
3 weeks and it's out of your system completely.
Which can make a huge difference to, the physical health of your body, your lungs.
It's not the nicotine that does you any harm. I know this sounds bizarre, but I mean, we tested nicotine, and we look for contraindications. It's not nicotine that does you any harm, it's all the other that they put with it.
I mean, that's the thing. Do we know actually what's in a cigarette?
No, they don't tell you what's in a cigarette. Definitely not. But they say there's lots of nasty things in it. They admit it now. It doesn't stop people smoking it.
Yeah.
But without a shadow of a doubt, when you use e-liquid, you do know what's in your e-liquid, right down to the nth degree.
So there's more control with the e-liquids than what's in a cigarette.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the medium that they're using is the same thing as you use when you're using an inhaler when you've got asthma.
Yeah.
So the medium to get the thing into your lungs is dangerous as using an inhaler. It is, like I say, it is so much safer, so much safer than smoking cigarettes.
I mean, this is interesting, Trish. We've gone from running a restaurant to being in the world of vaping. I mean, I cannot see any connection there at all.
Well, my brother-in-law saw it as quite a good connection, because he said you used to working under pressure, you used to following recipes. We had specific ways of making these e-liquids. He says you used to processes and paperwork and so on. So yeah, I mean, from doing the compliance, I then eventually went to work on my own. I've still got my business and I'm a consultant, but I was doing operating procedures and quality, because back when I was teaching, I would teach all the different levels of management and all the different things and operating procedures, all the things to run a business. So it all came full circle, because you'd got all these young guys who'd started literally in their garage or in the mum's kitchen making e-liquids, made a lot of money in the very early days, sufficient to be able to start a factory, sufficient to be able to buy bottling machines and so on. But they'd reached a point where they were producing very successfully, but part of the MHRA guidelines, or requirements should I say, was that they had proper quality manufacturing systems, and they didn't have them. Well, we didn't even know what they were. You'd say, well, have you got a batch number? What? Well, you need a batch number. Which batch have you just made? When did you make it? How many bottles have you made of this particular liquid? If there's a problem, how do we find it? They had no idea at all. So I went round to all the different factories and was showing them how to do their standard operating procedures, and I was assessing them, and I was helping them write them up, and I was helping them write the recipes up, so that we could find the recipes again and repeat the same recipe rather than chuck it all in, And so I worked for myself as a consultant and did that until I came here, because, of course, at first I could pop backwards and forwards and see my clients, and then COVID came in and killed it dead.
So where are you now? I mean, what are you up to now? I mean, are you
Bored and retired.
Bored and retired.
So bored, I can't tell you.
Really? What about socially? Have you got a good social network and social activities, or you want to get your teeth into something?
I've got lots of friends, and but I am sick of just doing lunch, and I'd like to get my teeth into something. What I'm actually doing at the moment is I am doing a training course on day trading on cryptocurrency.
Well, when you know about cryptocurrency, because I'm desperate to get somebody on the podcast talking about crypto, because I don't understand it and everybody I talk to doesn't understand it. We're all a bit afraid of it, but it is a thing and people are trading it. Banks are opening up accounts with it. So it is a thing of the future and we need to know about it. So you've just started a course?
Yes, my friend Simon, he's been doing it for quite some time. And he said, if you're bored, he said, why don't you do this? He said, and make yourself some money. He said, it'll keep you out of trouble. So he'd done this course with this guy called Crone, spelt Crown with a capital K. The guy's like hyperactive, but he's been in trading since he was 13 and he's a billionaire and he lives in Finland or somewhere where there's no taxes, or somewhere where there's very little taxes, and he's an absolute expert. And what he does is he makes money every day by looking at the fluctuations and the discrepancies and the trends.
Right.
So they call it scalping, where you see it going up and you take a little bit off, you earn a little bit, you earn a little bit. Well, if you've got a lot to start off with, you earn quite a lot.
Exactly. So skimming a little bit off the top of each one, but when you've got a lot of the base.
Yeah, exactly. But you're right, I use Audible an awful lot, and I'm listening to a book at the moment called, I will tell you because I'm finding it really good. And I've found, you're saying that we don't understand it. Tried to understand what Simon was telling me, and I started to read a book and got bored. The Ultimate Guide to Trading Cryptocurrency. It's 5 books. He said when I first heard about it, I thought it was just a thing, and then when I heard about it some more, he said people on the dark web were paying for drugs with it, which he said is true, they do. And then he said slowly but surely I started to think, hang on, I'm going to have to take this seriously and find out about it, because you'll hear people talking about the blockchain, you'll hear them talking about Bitcoin is 2 things. It's a Bitcoin and it's also a type of business. So
I mean, it's got its own lingo, hasn't it?
Absolutely, and it takes some getting used to. But it didn't take me long listening to that book to think, oh, right, this is the future. This definitely, banks are going to disappear. They really, really will. And also to appreciate the genius of it. They don't know who invented it. They say it's this Japanese guy, but nobody knows who he is and nobody's ever seen him.
I think it's very true when you say it's a currency of the future, because if we think about the last 2 years of the pandemic, cash has disappeared because everybody wanted you to pay by card or by your phone. In respect of paying for things, we moved at lightning speed away from cash and currency. And I did a podcast with one of my financial gurus, Pete Matthew of Meaningful Money, talking about educating children with money, because you saw your parents paying for things with notes and coins. And that's what we did as we grew up. Now we've got the plastic cards, people are paying by phone, people are paying by watch.
That's called Swift, by the way.
We are so moving away. I mean, even paying for a coffee or a newspaper, just dob your phone or your Apple Watch. And all the banks are saying currency as we know it is going to disappear.
It is, but the reason the banks are going to disappear is because everything is third party that we do. Even Swift, it's all third party. We have to go through a bank. You have to have a bank account. You have to have a bank account to take it from, to send it to. With the Bitcoin, ignore the fact it's Bitcoin. It's the bit chain that we're talking about, really. It takes your business, it takes it direct. There's no bank in between. You have a number, you send it to a number. And it's as simple as that. and it is so secure that nobody can hack into it, because the way that they create the whole thing involves millions of computers, so you'd have to hack all the millions of them. It is genius. It's complicated to understand, and even I'm only on the edge of understanding it, but I can see that it is totally genius, and it is definitely the future, and it gets rid of the banks. I mean, hell, I don't know about you, my bank won't even let me have my own money. Let mine give me some of theirs, you know what I mean?
That's very true, that's very true.
And they charge me for the pleasure of actually having my money in their bank.
Yeah. I think the thing is, banks are no longer giving a service, they are a shop. They are to sell you insurance.
Absolutely.
They're to sell you a property, a car.
They're definitely not giving a service.
Yeah, and I personally think this is when it all went wrong. Banks originally were a place to keep your money safe. You would put on a suit, make an appointment to go and see the bank manager. Now they're a shop. You know, difficult to get your own money out, and can we sell you with this, that, and everything else? Absolutely.
And if you want more than 10,000, you're obviously money laundering or up to no good, and you think, but I sold my house in England. I've got money there. All I want to do is move it here, and they make such a song and dance about it and charge you such a lot of money for it. Yeah. It's your own money.
Yeah, and they're all about the profits.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this BitChain cuts all that out. It's automated. It's the computer taking over. It's amazing.
So Trish, I'm glad to hear you're not bored now, because you've got this huge project with 5 books and your friend involved in it. So can I ask you to come back on the All About You podcast and educate us all in the world of digital currency?
Well, that's a bit of a challenge.
Yeah, I'd love to have you back, because I've been looking for someone for quite some time, and nobody has offered to come on. Trish, we've covered gardening, we've covered moving to Spain, we've covered restaurants, we've covered Sunday lunch, Bitcoin and the future of currency. Trish, thank you so much. It's been a fascinating conversation.
It's been fun.
And thank you for being a guest on the All About You podcast.
Oh, you're very welcome. Or as they say in Spain, de nada.
I hope you have enjoyed the conversation. Don't forget, if you have a story you would like to tell, please get in touch. My email address is allaboutyoupodcast@yahoo.com, and thank you for listening.